This might be the most overbuilt cutting board that we have ever made. Walnut, a eucalyptus handle, reinforced with maple dowels, and a last-minute design change. Let's see if this actually works. Today we're building a cutting board that combines multiple wood species and structural joinery, all into one functional piece. This isn't just about making something that looks good. It has to work. And the biggest challenge? Getting these completely different woods to work together without failing. We're starting by splitting a 2-inch piece of walnut for the main body, and then cutting a piece of eucalyptus for the handle from a scrap piece that we had lying around the shop. These wood species have completely different wood tones and grains, which is exactly what we want. The goal here is contrast, but controlled contrast. The first step is milling everything flat and square. With a piece like this, any small imperfection at the start turns into a big problem later. We're bringing the walnut down to final thickness and then getting clean edges for the glue up. Since both pieces of walnut came from one thicker piece, we're going for a book map pattern that will seem as if the wood has turned in on itself once it's complete. To glue up both pieces, we will be spreading a nice layer of Titebond 2 across the edge and then clamping them together until they dry. The idea behind this piece is that we're going to use two different types of wood species to create one piece. To unite them, we're going to use a joinery. We start by slowly working the black medium epoxy into every crevice, making sure it seeps deep into the cracks rather than just sitting on the surface. You'll notice we're taking our time here. This step is all about patience, letting the epoxy naturally settle and displace any trapped air. After it hardens, we come back and begin the surfacing process, carefully flattening the board and bringing everything back to a smooth, even plane. Now that we've surfaced the piece, we're gonna go ahead and carve out the actual walnut shape of the board, and then we can go ahead and carve out the handle, glue them together, and once that cures, we can surface it and then go through the finishing process. Once the rough cuts are done, we run both pieces through the thickness planer to smooth out the surface and bring everything to a consistent, even thickness. So we all know the saying, measure twice, cut once. Well, in this case, it's measure twice, carve once. When we did the carve out of the handle and then did the carve out of the board, we didn't take into consideration that the CNC bit is round. What this means is that on the piece where it's carving out the pocket where the handle is going to go into, it is more rounded than the handle itself. The handle has these sharp edges here that do not line up with the board itself. This comes to show you that no matter how much you prepare, something can always happen. The difference in the edge is creating this small gap here. And since we do not have any more of the eucalyptus wood, we will be rounding the edge on this handle to fit the walnut design. We slowly sand at the edges until they are a perfect fit. Once we confirm the fit one last time, we glue it up, clamp it down, and let it sit overnight. So shortly after we took that clip and clamped it up, the handle came loose. So we ended up adding 2 more clamps that are going to do vertical pressure, while the blue one that you saw in the previous clip did the horizontal pressure to make sure that it's not going to move like this or like this. So here we have the blue clamp that is putting the pressure along the longer side of the board, and then we added these 2 red clamps that are going to keep it in place. That way this does not start to bend and the board can stay straight. As we are removing the clamps, we notice a small gap along the edge of the joint. To correct this, we will be going back to an old woodworker's trick, taking fine sawdust, mixing it with glue, and creating a natural color-matched filler. We work that mixture into the small crevice so that it packs into the grain, and once it sets, we sand it flush, leaving a seamless connection. We prep a small batch of slow setting epoxy in the same black pigment for a few thicker crevices on the piece. We could use the instant epoxy from earlier, but in our experience, the slow setting epoxy does a better job of filling these areas. It's been 24 hours since we poured the epoxy on the piece to seal all those crevices that you saw in the prior clip, and we are ready to do the last joinery of this piece. First, we are going to run the piece through the planer to get rid of that excess epoxy, and then for the joinery itself, we're going to be using hard maple that will give the handle support with the walnut, but also be a very nice accent to the piece. We line them up carefully across the seam, making sure each hole is drilled straight and evenly spaced. These aren't just decorative, they are designed to add real strength to the joint. As we glue and tap the dowels into place, we can feel the joint lock together. Once again, we use that woodworker's trick on the dowels, but this time with a different sawdust.
This piece is a definition of it's developed over time. We finish the dowels, we love how it looks, we feel very confident in the sturdiness and in the appearance of it. So we decided to add a design with epoxy. How we got here, I'm not sure, but let's show you what we're gonna do.
If you have seen any of our prior videos, you may remember that we usually carve out the design and fill it in with the epoxy before cutting out the shape of the piece. Doing it this way makes it easy to control the epoxy pour and prevents any spills since the pockets are entirely enclosed. With this being a last-minute decision, this changes things a little bit. We have to be very precise with where the CNC will carve out the pockets and ensure that they are not carved outside of the piece. If it does, then the epoxy pour will not go as smooth as usual. We were midway of the carve out and I accidentally kicked the emergency stop button. So about 30 minutes into the carve out, we're gonna have to run it all over. Luckily, we can go on the program and delete the ones that we already did and then just keep going, but
that doesn't always happen.
Yeah, sometimes we have to just start all over. So if anybody has any ideas for the emergency button, please let us know. At this point in the video, we wanted to say thank you for being here and joining us along this process. If you have enjoyed the video so far, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing to our channel. We have very exciting builds coming in the near future and we cannot wait to share it with you. Once the carve out is complete, we start the prep work for the epoxy by cleaning any debris left behind by the CNC. We are ready to do the epoxy pour, and we are thinking we're gonna go with like a bronze, almost black color, something that'll kind of blend into the actual wood, since we want that handle to be kind of like the main accent, but at the same time, when you look at it, we'll give it like a nice tone to it. Now it is time for the epoxy pour, which is always one of the most satisfying parts of the process. Slowly, we start filling each carved channel, letting the epoxy flow into every corner and crevice. For any areas that might need a little extra push to get fully filled, we use a small stick to guide the epoxy where it is needed, and then use a blowtorch to pop any air bubbles that it may have. You can see as the epoxy starts to settle naturally, coating the walls of the carved pockets. We like to work in small sections to ensure that each pocket is filled. And once it's complete, we allow the epoxy to cure for a few days. We did not like how the epoxy design carved into the maple dowels, so we did them again. This may not be a noticeable part of the design, but it did not look right to us. The hardest part is going to be lining up the new dowel pockets with the old one, as any small adjustment can make it look bigger. Let's see if we were able to line it up. It worked. With the dowel secured, we give the piece its final surfacing pass before moving on to the finishing touches. We want the handle to really stand out, so we will be giving it a larger round over than the rest of the board. We soften the rest of the edges and prep the piece for sanding. This process is what takes it from a block of wood to something that actually feels good in your hands. We start our sanding process with a 60 grit sandpaper and work our way up to a final 220 grit with water popping in between. Adding the water in between the grits allows for the wood grain to rise, which will ensure a smoother finish at the end. As we progress through the process, we retouch those crevices from earlier to ensure that they are entirely filled with epoxy and do not have any voids. This is always the best part, where everything comes alive. The walnut deepens, the eucalyptus pops, and the epoxy ties it all together. This piece has a little bit of everything: joinery, reinforcement, contrast, and detail. And even though the design changed multiple times throughout the build, we could not be more proud of the result. We started off with a vision, and as you saw, it got changed a lot throughout the process, but it led to this piece. The epoxy contrasting with the wood and that beautiful eucalyptus handle made it truly one of a kind. Thank you for watching. See you on the next one.